Okay, part 2 assumes that you've kind of at least sent off for your soil sample to be tested, if not gotten it back already. And we're just going to basically cover what information can be gained from these different categories that we covered in the previous part. So the physical properties of soil come from the ratio of different sized particles, the very bits of soil itself. So first and foremost, soil simply provides a foundation for the plant, for the roots to actually root into, and they go into the soil and they hold the plant to the earth itself against the disruptive forces of wind and water so that the plant stays in one place. This anchoring also provides not so much a defense against herbivory, but the potential to survive it, because if the roots are well established enough, if they keep the crown of the plant anchored to the ground, maybe it loses some leaves and stuff, but it doesn't get ripped all the way in and ingested by the animal. It still maybe is there a bit, and so it's rooted against the ground, and it can maybe try and come back. Given these and numerous other physical parameters of soil, it might surprise you that there is a single soil texture which is considered optimum. Loam is comprised of all the key physical characteristics needed to support a vigorous crop growth. Loam is an even mix of sand, silt, and clay. So it's a really convenient coincidence. An even third of soil particles grants the best of all the soil properties, for most instances. But how these particles are arranged in the soil dictates a lot about the kind of flow type properties of that soil. So the soil body, when we look down at it, you just see that soil surface, but actually if you get close enough, it's filled with pores. It's soil particles and pore space between soil particles. And those pore spaces are filled with air or water. It's just voids where the soil particles are not. So just like if you were to look at a rocky mountainside and you can see the detail of spaces between rocks, you could even maybe make out a full cave. Like on one hand, if you look out far enough or look back far enough, it's all just rock. But if you get close, there's boulders and stuff, and you can see spaces. And you get closer, you see like there's a cave opening and stuff. So the same thing's happening with soil. When we zoom down into the soil, we start seeing gaps, the empty spaces between grains of sand and that kind of thing. It is in these spaces that the flow of air and water can occur between soil particles, and this is key to plant growth. For example, hydraulic conductivity is a measure of how well water flows through a soil. Or water holding capacity is just like it sounds, how much water can be held within a soil. Water and air in a soil, they are inversely related to one another, because really it comes down to this, like a soil body is either soil particles or pore space. Then that pore space can then be divided into water or air. The particles don't go anywhere. So there's no moving that, right? It's always soil particles, pore space. But then this can fill with water, drain, and be filled with air. Water pushes the air out. Air kind of eventually fills back in when gravity's pulled the water back out. So in this vein, pore space determines the ability for gas exchange as well between like the lithosphere, the soil, and the atmosphere, the air. Microbes and bugs in the very ground beneath our feet. We're looking at how well can they breathe, how porous is the soil, how well can they breathe, because just like you and I can't breathe soil, bugs can't, soil microbes can't breathe soil either. They're just small enough that they're fitting between soil and breathing the air between soil. So how connected is that air, how exchanged is that air in that little pocket of soil versus the atmosphere above? And this kind of leads us right into the biological aspects of soil. We're abbreviating a whole lot of processes here, but we can kind of equate this to your organic matter levels. Organic matter is technically anything containing carbon, but for your soil assessment purposes, we're basically looking at detritus or the dead stuff that feeds the living things within your soil. It's not the plants, not directly. This is more about the microbes and the invertebrates and other small things which live within your soil. We're interested to know the health of the soil microbial community because their metabolism and digestion are part of what drives the nutrient cycle within a soil. So let me extend this digestive metaphor for a moment, if you will. You and I, we don't eat potatoes, right? Not directly, right? Okay, potato, right? I could just eat this, I guess. You could eat it raw and all that. But even still, I'm not eating this potato. First, I chew it into a porridge of its component parts, so it's still like a potato, but it's now potato slurry. Between the enzymes in my mouth, the acid in my stomach, it starts chemically dissolving this mashed potato into a further decomposed nutrient slurry of starches and sugars, no longer broken bits of potato, but now like the chemical components, right? The starches, the sugars, the various minerals, they're starting to break free of the compounds that is the potato chunk. A chunk of potato dissolved bits and minerals. So this soup is dissolved and dissociated and finer and finer until it enters our small intestines, where we still aren't absorbing anything directly, not really. We have our own set of microbes in our gut microbiome. They process our food for one further step, giving a pre-digestion of these chemicals before we get to kind of like slurp up the excess through our intestinal walls. So if we view the nutrient cycling for the purpose of growing a plant, we see an eerily similar version of the digestive process happening out there in the soil, except this time, instead of a potato as a source of nutrition, we're looking at rocks. I don't have it here. I got a rock somewhere, right? We're looking at rocks, right? Plants not eating the rock, plants eating the dissolved bits off of the rock. Rocks come in all shapes and sizes, from that of the earth itself, right? The earth is one giant ball of rock in space, to boulders, to ever smaller pieces of gravel. It's the basic process of getting smaller and smaller and smaller rocks. It's the same as chemical and physical weathering. But just like the human with a potato in their hand, a plant with roots clutching a rock can't really absorb any nutrients until that piece is smaller, whether down to 2 millimeters in diameter or smaller, to make it sand. That's when it starts mattering to plants. So just like I can't just grab this and eat it, a plant can't just grab this and eat it. So 2 millimeters or smaller. What starts happening when they get that small? Two things. First, we see an appreciable decomposition of component mineral parts of these tiny pieces of rock. So we're finally actually pulling significant nutrients off of it. I mean, there's always nutrients, minerals being leached out of rocks as they're breaking apart. It's always some tiny little bit. But comparatively, when something's a piece of sand, what's being leached out is significantly more nutrition than what's being leached off of a boulder. Second, the surfaces of these particles have become so weathered that they begin to develop charges which hold on to various elements and compounds which were themselves part of the rock possibly at a previous time. Perhaps even the rock that they're now adhered to. But as the rock became disassociated into some chemicals, this rock gained a charge, and now the chemicals, they're chemically bonded rather than physically bonded. And that's important because a plant can access chemically bonded nutrients. Okay, so it's these component pieces, a single small handful of elements dissolved from rock, which feeds plants. And so here we are at the chemical category of soil. A fertility assessment of soil is really just a focused chemical assessment, right? The fertilizers are really just chemicals underneath. And so we're just interested in a certain subset of chemicals for our fertility assessment. Plants are chemical compound creation factories. They turn raw ingredients from the air and the ground into their own living structures. And so managing plant fertility is an enormous field of study. And you'll find plenty of information from other sources. So for our purposes, I'm just going to point out that for optimal health, be it plant or animal, you need an optimal diet. Just like you or I need a proper balance of proteins, carbs, fats, certain plants need certain ratios of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And just like you and I do better with a full complement of vitamins and minerals, so too do plants thrive with the right availability of certain meso and micronutrients. A shortage of one or more vital nutrients can lead to a deficiency in the growing plant. An overage of nutrients can lead to toxicity for that plant, or even poison the surrounding environment. So we'll cover how to adjust fertility in later steps. For now, I just want you to appreciate the potential of nutrients that your soil might be able to provide. When you get a report back from the lab, it should tell you your soil's CEC, which stands for cation exchange capacity. This is basically the accounting of negatively charged sites in your soil, which can hold positively charged elements or molecules. For our purposes, this is like the size of your soil's gas tank. It's not the quality of the input. It's not the efficiency of the system. It's just a measurement of how much gas or fertility it can hold. You'll have to manage your soil with CEC in mind to provide the right amount of fertility to your crop while minimizing losses or leaching from your field, both because it wastes money and it's bad for the environment.